If a computer program is entirely deterministic, classical information theory says it cannot create any new information. So how is it possible that running a deterministic algorithm like AlphaZero against itself creates grandmaster-level intelligence? The authors of this paper argue that we need a new metric to understand how computational effort converts data into knowledge. This paradox arises because established metrics like Shannon entropy and Kolmogorov complexity rely on an idealized observer with infinite resources. To such an observer, encrypted data looks just like random noise because they can theoretically crack it, but for a real-world model with finite constraints, the distinction is critical. The researchers identify that existing theory effectively claims deterministic processes generate no value, which contradicts the empirical success of synthetic data. To solve this, the paper proposes splitting information into two distinct components based on a runtime constraint, T. They define time-bounded entropy as the true random noise that remains unpredictable given the model's constraints, and they introduce epiplexity to account for the structural information. Epiplexity represents the complex patterns, like the rules of grammar or code, that a computationally bounded observer can eventually learn. This figure visualizes the relationship between computational effort and information type. True randomness remains high entropy regardless of effort, while simple patterns like a repeating sequence have low entropy and low epiplexity. The most interesting category is the third column, representing data like text or code. It has high epiplexity because it looks unpredictable initially, but contains deep structures that emerge only as you apply more computational power. Since we cannot run every possible computer program to calculate this metric perfectly, the authors propose measuring it through the training dynamics of neural networks. By analyzing the area under the loss curve during training, specifically the frequential coding method, they can estimate how many bits of structural information the model has extracted. Essentially, data with high epiplexity keeps reducing loss over a long period, whereas random data causes the model to plateau immediately. The paper validates this approach using experiments with cellular automata and chess. They show that while Rule 30 looks like high-entropy noise to a bounded observer, Rule 54 contains deep learnable structures that register as high epiplexity. Even more intriguingly, they find that learning chess games in reverse order generates higher epiplexity than the standard forward order, suggesting that harder tasks force the model to internalize deeper logic, rather than relying on surface analytics. These measurements offer a compelling explanation for why language models generalize better than vision models without modification. The authors demonstrate that text data contains significantly higher structural information, or epiplexity, compared to image data like CFAR-5M. Ultimately, high epiplexity forces a model to develop complex internal mechanisms, such as induction heads, which directly supports better performance on out-of-distribution tasks. This work redefines information not as a static property of data, but as a dynamic interaction between complexity and the computational budget available to understand it. For further details on how epiplexity explains the value of synthetic data, I encourage you to read the full paper.